Doe Detroit. It's your host, Arada.
And it's your favorite host, Uncle Tay.
And welcome to
Waddup Doe Detroit,
the podcast. Period. So today we have a lovely guest. And we're talking about what does Detroit have to do with environmental justice, but more importantly, what role does Detroit have to play in the environmental justice movement? And to help enhance that conversation, we have to my right, Miss Calandra Jones.
Hey everybody, my name is Calandra. I am a new resident to Detroit, but not new to the study of what Detroit means to this movement. I studied geography and critical race studies at Dartmouth and graduated in 2015. I've spent time in construction and planning and currently do sustainability work for Detroit Future City. But besides all that, I'm also a writer and creative, and I'm looking forward to creating a coalition of women of color creatives in the city here very soon.
And to my right, we got Bryan.
What's up? My name is Bryan Lewis. I'm Executive Director of EcoWorks. We'll talk a lot about EcoWorks in a little bit, but I'm an artist and creative in the city, and I just so happen to run a nonprofit organization that focuses on environmental justice, which is what we're talking about here today. So, excited to be here.
Yes.
And to my right, which is my right-hand man, we got Big Ray.
I'm Big Ray. I'm an Eastside creative. I rap, I blog, podcast. You may know me from Big Ray in the Game podcast or Brag the Brand. But we're here today.
You be.
So today, like I said, our conversation is about what role does Detroit have to play in the environmental justice movement? And to start that conversation, I have one simple question. What is environmental justice? And we can just go down the line and you guys just tell me what that means.
You want to have Bryan go first.
Okay, cool. Bryan's going first. So Bryan.
All right, well, there's a lot of different ways to think about environmental racism. But the way I like to break it down is to take each word. Environmental justice.
You jump.
Should we start this segment over?
No, we gotta pause a little bit.
It's all good.
We're going to keep going.
And go ahead.
You rolling.
So there's a lot of ways to think about environmental justice. But one of the ways I like to break it down is to take each word and try to define what each word means. Right? So when we think about our environment, there's three things or three categories that I'm thinking about. You're talking about your natural environment, you're talking about the trees, the earth, the water, the ground, right? Those types of things. You're thinking about the built environment, right? So everything that God gave you, you built on top of it. We're talking about buildings, we're talking about all the infrastructure that we have, where the water goes, where our electricity flows, right? And then we also have our social environment, right? The environment that we exist in on a day-to-day basis, how we interact and how we love one another or maybe not, right? So we have all of these different things that comprise our environment, and then we have the concept of justice. And I'm actually going to take a step back to talk about the concept of racism, in which justice is the remedy for it, right? So racism itself is talking about power. You're talking about structures, you're talking about power, and when you're talking about environmental racism, you're talking about the ways that power and the systems that influence power, how that influences how we connect to our environment, whether it's through our natural environment, our built environment, or our social environment, right? And so when we talk about justice, we're talking about how we can unlearn and deconstruct, in a way, the systems that have been built that create that racist environment through our natural, through our built, and through our social environment, and correct that through justice and unlearn the harms that have been done to people over centuries.
Right. That's definitely a definition right there. Like, thank you so much, Bryan, for that, because couldn't have said it better than myself. Anybody else want to add to that?
He pretty much broke it down very, very nicely. I'm gonna just add a little bit. Really more so on the justice side, as far as being more fair and equal as far as treatment to race, color, income, living, you know what I'm saying? Any type of situation that's different per household or per family type per se, but just equal treatment, because everybody don't get the same treatment. Everybody, some people get, some more food stamps, some people not qualified for food stamps, but who judges the treatment for it?
What are the
qualifying
standards?
for food stamps, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's just my little input.
cool.
Yeah, that
Thank you.
makes sense. I think I'll add a little bit on that. So for me, environmental justice is so important because we all at this table understand what racism is, right? And we know where that comes from. But people don't often think about racism as being built into the environment, built into everything that you need to live as a living, breathing organism on this earth. So for example, your food deserts. If you live in a neighborhood without a grocery store, what are you eating? And if those outcomes, if those consequences wreak havoc on your health, for example, and you try to go to the doctor, there's racism there too, right? So the body is under attack already. The mind is under attack if you don't have access to green space, as in like parks and nature, natural environments around you. If you live surrounded and blocked into with redlining, for example, one environment that doesn't have the things that you need to live well and thrive as a human, then that is an environmental problem. Environmental justice speaks truth to that and tries to mobilize and inspire people to see themselves as not a product of their environment, but a product of what their environment doesn't look like on purpose, type of thing. Someone decided that you live in a neighborhood without trees. Someone decided that you live in a neighborhood that doesn't have a grocery store. Someone decided that you live in a neighborhood that's next to a landfill. Why was that decided? And when we answer that question, we find that it's racially motivated. At the bottom of every other reason, race is at the bottom, which is why it's important and which is why we have to define it when we talk about it, because it really can get really deep.
Yeah. Facts.
And just to add to a final point to that, Tay brought up the conversation of equity. And when you got equity in something, right, you own a piece of it, right? You own the decisions, you own everything that happens or doesn't happen with, let's say, our environment, right?
Yep.
So if we have equity in our environment, what that looks and feels like is decision-making power.
We can do
economic,
more.
Yes. What's up?
We can do more.
We can do more.
You know what I'm saying?
And we have the power and the access to do it.
Yep. Yeah, that's great. I also just wanted to just like add a little tidbit to something that you said about a food desert. And a couple of years ago in this room was having a conversation with, and I think Bryan, if you remember this, with one of my old coworkers named King, and he pushed back on the idea of a food desert because a desert is a naturally occurring thing, and there's nothing natural about not having food. And he changed a name from a food desert to a food apartheid because it's something intentional, an intentional separation of people from a food source. And that's exactly what an apartheid is. So really, as we're defining and we're naming things, putting truth to what we're talking about too, so that that conversation can be really pushed forward. When you say it's a desert, people are like, it's supposed to be like this. But when you say it's an apartheid, people are like, wait, hold on, like, why? You feel me? They start to ask why.
Yeah.
And that's really important.
Let me take that one step deeper. I had the fortunate opportunity to go visit South Africa a couple of times, and we were talking about apartheid, right? South Africans are really intentional about the use of the word apartheid.
Yeah.
And it has two parts to it. It's apart and hide, which actually means hate. You know what I mean? So you have to have that understanding of, when you're talking about apartheid, I think that's a great word to use. You're talking about the separation, but you're also talking about the hate that fuels that separation. You know what I mean? And I think that's a really important piece to add to that conversation.
While talking about like words, I think that like while talking about environmental justice, something that Bryan and Calandra both brought up, which I feel like are like important buzzwords in this conversation, are like intent and access. Like when you were talking about like redlining, like if people don't know what redlining is, and honestly, I was like entering this conversation, I was like a little bit afraid because I was like, damn, I don't know anything about environmental justice. Like I'm a poli-sci major, you feel me? Like I'm a political philosophy, you feel me? But then when you got to talk about redlining, like redlining is basically like the intentional drawing of like municipal lines to deny people access to certain things like grocery stores, something that you would think would be something that is naturally occurring in a neighborhood, right? People need to eat food. People need food to survive. You would think that like access to grocery stores, and not even just grocery stores, but grocery stores of quality that offer things like fresh produce and things like that.
Yeah.
And then like going even further, like grocery stores that offer like specialty items. I was reading something that like Trader Joe's only set up grocery stores where there's like a certain percentage of people with bachelor's degrees. So like going further past like the income separation or like racial separation, there's like an educational divide as well. Like when it comes to like simple things like access to food, like
speak on it.
I'm gonna tap into that because I live off of Woodward, and just last year it was a grocery store a block over from the laundromat. It was like in between the Family Dollar and the laundromat, but that grocery store is now closed down. You know what I'm saying? And I either got to slide all the way up to 8 Mile. These are the two closest grocery stores: 8 Mile and Woodward, which is Meyer, or Woodward and like what's that, Martin Luther King for Whole Foods. You know what I'm saying? It's like, all right, if I gotta go to Whole Foods, I know I gotta spend some cheese in here. I know I gotta spend some cheese in here.
Talking about a whole paycheck at Whole Foods.
But you know what I'm saying? If you know you don't have no money, you're not going to Whole Foods. You're gonna make that trip to go to Myers.
but
That's
then
on
there
8
are
Mile.
people who like I live in Midtown.
Me
so
too,
like like I can go and I can get like grocery items from like Marcus Market. It's like a bodega almost, you know what I'm saying? Or like Whole Foods is like in walking distance. And if I don't want to go to Whole Foods, there's like University Village Market, which is basically like it's more accessible to like Wayne State students. And it's more affordable, you know what I'm saying? So there are more options for me living in Midtown, and there are like obviously like more white people who live in Midtown, you know what I'm saying, just to keep everything to be, you know.
Gentrified.
Gentrified.
Yeah.
And that's why it's more access.
You know, it's called, there's a theme that I just want to like end on is the Whole Foods effect. If you really want to start looking at how gentrification moves and how Whole Foods plans their planning and like how they're gonna put a new grocery store in a neighborhood, it's the craziest thing ever. Like it's the research, what they do intentionally, how they buy out like buildings around there. Like it's a whole thing. And just if you are curious about and we'll definitely have an episode where we dive in deeper into this topic. I'm gonna have some great guests for that too. But if you really want to know about gentrification, look into the Whole Foods effect, because
Also got a homie, a young man that is black.
Yes, you better speak on it.
He is
from the east side.
Speak on it.
And he is putting together first black-owned grocery store on the east side.
Make the hood
grocery project.
You feel me?
Homegrown, not bought.
We're making the hood healthy again. Period.
We might gotta get Ralph on the episode.
You already know that's who I'm bringing on. Definitely.
Y'all gotta stay tuned for sure.
Definitely. So in this whole episode, we're talking about Detroit and we're talking about environmental justice. And now, Ray, you're able to tap in because you're seeing the connection between social justice things that are happening in Detroit and environmental justice movement. Now, what role do you all think Detroit has to play in environmental justice movement? If you can just like give us a couple of words on that. You all being very technical and like this is what you do for a living, so you know. And then you all just like being part of the city. Like, what role do you think that Detroit has to play in environmental justice movement?
I'm gonna say just being more intentionally involved in the community's work. Like, there's so much talent in Detroit. There's so much talent, so much young talent, minority talent. Let me say that. And I myself, I flourish, but I know as a whole we don't flourish how we want to because we feel like we stuck in the shell. We can't make the money we want to make. You know what I'm saying? Off the things we're passionate about. But at the end of the day, it's so much money in this world. It's just we don't have the access to it. We don't usually gain the access to it. So Detroit has to give us more access to it. To answer the question.
Yeah, I would say on that, Detroit's role, and this is like partially the reason why I'm here. I wrote a lot of papers that covered the environmental movement in Detroit while I was at Dartmouth because it was one of the only cities that seemed to be taking it seriously. Detroit is further along the curve than a lot of people think, and even around the world, Detroit is considered a leader in environmental work and environmental justice. We have, people like to look at vacant land like it's a bad thing or like it's an indicator of blight. First of all, who told you that it was an indicator of blight? Who taught you that? And also, it's between the vacant land, it's a resource. You can plant anything. You can do anything. Land is ownership. It's power. It's access. It's decision making. It's what makes the powers that be look at you differently. Instead of an agitator, now you are invested in your city. You're owning something. You are part of why they even have a job in the first place. So Detroit's role is to continue to be a leader. And my work and our work is to ensure that everybody understands how to do that in their own way, through their own industry, their own work, their own talents, so that we continue to stay at the forefront, because the world is watching.
That's facts.
Yeah. And I mean, you all have put it beautifully. I don't really have anything to add, but what I will say is that some of your thoughts really inspired me to think about my work and what really led me here. And before I was doing this job, I was leading a program called the Youth Energy Squad. And in that time, I got to talk with so many students, thousands of students in Detroit public schools and other schools in Detroit. And it was fascinating to me just how often students would come up in response to, you know, hey, do people, how do people in Detroit look at their environment? You know, students would respond with, people in Detroit don't care about their environment. People, I mean, you see all this trash, you see this blight, you see this, that, and the third. And it was fascinating to me because, I mean, I'll give away the game here, but like, that's not true.
At all.
It's not true.
Like, we're here.
You know what I mean? I started this off by saying, you know, I'm very passionate about storytelling and about the narratives that, you know, inform the stories that we tell ourselves, essentially. And this is another story, an incorrect story, a racist story that we've been told about who we are and how much we take care of the things that we either own or don't own, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it was, that thought just came up for me, and it's something that I think is a part of the conversation, because it's important to consider that, yeah, education is important. Yeah, getting involved is really important. And yeah, it's important for us to, you know, again, like we're saying, have that education, have that awareness. But it's not the be-all, end-all, right? Because at the end of the day, if we don't have the resources, if we don't have the money, if we don't have the political power, the access to these tables where decisions are being made about us, where we're not actually at that table, right? You know, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
Say that.
You know what I mean? So like, unless we have those things, we're really not going to see the progress that we're really talking about.
Yeah.
Because we can have all of these kind of, you know, this is, and this might be getting a little too deep, but I'll just introduce this and back off. The energy efficiency movement, right, which is a part of the environmental justice movement, which is a part of all these different things, upholds the fact that, and this is true, that there are things that we can do personally to make our lives and to make our environment more efficient and to be more responsible to our environment. That is a true statement. However, what's not true is that we got more to do than what y'all got to do. And when I say y'all, I'm talking about white people. You know what I mean? So that is, again, that's just a narrative that we have to kind of really work to unroot, because it's leading to a lot of self-deprecation.
Right. Reusable bags will not save the world.
Or ditch your
Plastic,
straws.
yes.
Or plastic straws.
We're not laughing.
No, it's not funny. You know,
I'm hitting on with y'all.
Well, it's not.
It's not serious.
It's like 0.003% of like actual plastic straws that end up in our water cycle. The companies that are making the straws are doing way more harm than you who are using.
And the crazy thing is, it's those same plastic companies that are promoting recycling.
Yes. Or have recycle facilities. So you start to think about, okay, where does this narrative of personal responsibility come in? Yes, we do have personal responsibility. We all do. And that's the question. Like, we all have that responsibility. Who, though, has the most impact? Look, with the Chip Bag Project, and I tell people this a lot. From individuals, we've been able to collect, I think, 40 pounds of foil, and we've been collecting for 4 months. From companies, we've been able to collect 15,000 pounds in 3 months. Like, you can't compare that. You cannot compare that shit at all. So it's not, yes, as individuals, we should be more conscious. We should do more things. But if we're even bringing this back to Detroit, yes, Detroiters could do more. We're doing a lot, honestly. We're doing everything.
Don't trip.
Everything, okay? If you think that things are not being done, everything is.
There's over 1,500 urban farms in the city.
Correct. Yeah. That was the first thing I read about Detroit at Dartmouth, and it blew my mind. This is the whole reason I'm here. Like, I want a garden too.
One of the largest sustainable farms in the world is in the city of Detroit.
The largest open air market.
Right. It's in the city of Detroit. Like, there are solutions here in the city, but there is a narrative that takes away responsibilities away from the companies and the corporations who are building these large power plants and oil refineries and things like that. And it's like, no, it's you as a person who's driving your car down, not the fact that there is a big ass highway in between a neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Like, who put it there? That's the question. Who put it there?
Yeah, you're gonna put it there and then say I'm wrong for driving.
You know, like, it's like putting a chocolate cake in front of a kid in their eye level, telling them you should.
Can't have it.
You're not even telling them they can't have it. No, telling you can eat that. You can eat that, and then when you eat it, damn, why you eat that?
That's exactly it. Be aware of any narrative that tries to tell you the environment is dying because of something that you are doing. Because especially when you look at history, it's not us. It's never been us. It's never been us. We have always been close to the earth. Mm-hmm. Have always toiled the earth and brought that energy with us to this day. It's not us. It's the systems. But that isn't to discourage anybody. The good thing about personal responsibility and acting as an individual and getting involved and transforming your neighborhood in the way you want to see it and all those things that end up creating environmental justice, they help you feel a little bit better about the fact that these companies not yet are listening. Right. And we got a lot of work to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, with that said, though, and I hope I'm not.
Here we go.
We gotta go. Before you do that, let's do time check, because I know you said 20 minutes. You good? You gotta leave?
No, it's not good.
Okay, cool.
So I guess we're answering the question, why we care about sustainability.
Yeah.
And do you want to go? Or do you
I'll go first. Okay. I'll go first. So the way that I came to care about sustainability actually started in high school. My high school got a grant from the Waddup Foundation, and they started doing environmental programming. At the time, we didn't have a real diversity of programming, so just to study something new was really cool, but it kind of lit me on fire from like the ground up. The idea that we weren't meant to just live on the surface of the earth, but that we are a part of the earth really grabbed my attention. And for my senior project, I decided to interview local architects and urban planners and basically asking them the very inflammatory question of, why don't you do more sustainability in the city? And that question has followed me throughout my whole career. It led to me studying geography at Dartmouth, which sounds like maps. It's a lot more than maps. It's about why we have place. How do humans create the place that they live in? What has led up to the conditions that have caused our places to look like they do now? And that question, that statement, that truth, led me to Detroit. My family is from here originally. My grandpa worked at the Chrysler plant on Jefferson. My mom got kicked out of every Metro Detroit high school in the area, which is why I am from Grand Rapids, because we had to move. And my grandma worked for Blue Cross Blue Shield. So Detroit was always kind of a home away from home for me. And I resolved myself, after I got done studying the ins and outs of how the environment and racism are really tied together, I resolved myself to come back and do work here. So that's why currently I work for a nonprofit here in the city doing sustainability work, leading two really large programs that try to inspire residents to understand themselves as part of their environment, but even more than that, as change makers of their environment. If you walk out of your house and you don't like what you see, there are resources in the city that can help you change that. Is it going to be easy? I don't think a lot of things in Detroit are easy, but there are organizations that have the knowledge to give you so that you're able to create that change. You want to see a park in your neighborhood? There is a way to do that. You want a garden in your neighborhood, access to food in your neighborhood. There's a way to do that. The problem comes in when not all the information is publicly accessible. There's lots of organizations working in the city trying to affect that work, But unfortunately, there's a lot of work that we have to do as organizations to make sure the people of Detroit understand, you know, do that same thing that happened to me in high school, to connect themselves back to the earth. Because at the end of the day, like that meme that's going around, we really do have a planet that provides for all our needs, and we chose a system of racism and credit. And bills and politics and death. So yeah, so you should care. You should care because it really does tie into everything, and that's why I do the work that I do.
Love it. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna add to that. I mean, I feel like you covered it all, but you made me think about my experience growing up and the fact that I wasn't an environmentalist. I never was the person that knew a lot about my environment or knew a lot about recycling or even knew how to recycle. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't know how to recycle until I started working at Youth Energy Squad when I was 24. And I'm saying this to say that you don't have to be an environmentalist to care about your environment. You know what I mean? The reality is that as long as you care about your people, as long as you care about your family, as long as you care about yourself, you have an electricity bill, right? You have, you go outside your house and you see, maybe you see trash or maybe you see trees or maybe whatever you see, you have an environment, right? So you have a place. And as long as you have, again, a place and people that you care about, you can do right by those people and get involved, not just in environmental justice, but you can go work at Chrysler, but you can have an environmental mindset, right? You can go work at Walmart, and I wouldn't recommend that you do, but if you do, you can go there with an environmental mindset and with an understanding of how the systems that are around you are moving and influencing you, whether you know it or not, right? I think it's really just about expanding your knowledge, getting involved, getting engaged, and if you're going to talk about actually rising up and actually doing some of this work, it's also about networking, right? Getting involved and starting to meet some of the people that are actually on the ground. It's not hard to do, because guess where they at? They on the ground. You know what I mean? They out there, and they need volunteers. Right?
Yeah.
So if you're ever looking for an opportunity to just learn more, why not just go out and work with, for example, a Monica Lewis-Patrick, who's out there every day delivering water to people whose water has been shut off, right? We're not talking about a quote-unquote environmental issue. We're talking about a human issue where we've shut off people's access to water, a human necessity, right? And people like Monica Lewis-Patrick are out there every single day trying to right that wrong. You can get involved with people like that, and I think that that's probably the easiest way to just take one step, right? Get out there, start to meet some of these people, start to learn the things that they've seen, and start to hopefully maybe see it for yourself if you haven't lived that yourself, you know? I think that that's something also, I guess I just want to add, should I just stop now? Because I don't have to add that. I'll stop there.
I'll close it out. How about this? Because there's something important, right? Okay. So if you haven't taken a step before, right? And if this is the first time that you're hearing about environmental justice or even realizing that there is an environmental movement and has been one in Detroit for a while, don't feel bad. I almost didn't study environmental anything at Dartmouth because the first class that I walked into was all white. And I didn't feel welcome, and I didn't like the narratives that were being taught about cities as being dirty, violent places, and Detroit is no stranger to that narrative. But there was a black professor at Dartmouth that taught in the geography department, and geography, at least in that one department, was more aware of that narrative, and they had formed a whole department separately from the environmental studies department, which was more Birkenstocks and reusable shopping bags and Whole Foods and eating organic, which isn't necessary, by the way. But if this is your first introduction and you're just now learning about these things and you're asking yourself, like, why should I even care about this? Like, environmentalism is a white people thing. It's the girls in the Birkenstocks. It's PETA, all that stuff. Understand that, like Bryan said, if you have a body, that's what brought it to me too. That's what lit me on fire about it, is that everything that humans need to live, has been systematically taken away from a lot of people based on race, based on class, based on lots of things, but race is always at the base of the problem. So, having grown up in a very
radical leftist household, and mostly radical because I think my mom would have an opinion about what is the left. But growing up in a household that understood that blackness was diverse and it wasn't a monolith, as in all black people are different, and that's good and okay, and that there's a story out there that all black folks are the same. Growing up in a household that, you know, had me reading like Black Rage at I think 14, you know, led me to the movement in the way that I'm at it now. So if you think you shouldn't care, or if you think like this isn't for me, just read a couple books, talk to a couple people around the city, and you'll see that not only is the movement here, it's been here, and it was built by Detroiters.
Question, that statement, that truth, led me to...
What you doing out here, Tay?
My family's from here.
Man, I'm really just doing a little recap. Waddup Doe Detroit podcast. Me and my guests, me and my host, me and Rada had some beautiful individuals, intellectuals come through and sit down and chop it up with us. And basically, we were conversing about, you know, social equity, community, building within the community, knowing your resources and being able to get more active within your community, and really just understanding that you can do more for you, yourself, and your community. Be sure to check it out. Thanks for having me.